A volatile year for global and domestic economies. In 2020, the financial services group Alexander Forbes expects 2021 to see an improvement. That's good news, but it will be uneven across economies. Isam Mhlanga, chief economist at Alexander Forbes, believes our economic recovery depends on several factors. Some, he says, controllable and others uncontrollable. The most important one being the logistics of COVID-19 vaccines. It's a good afternoon to you and welcome. You go on to say what will make all the difference is vaccination, which includes the ability to procure vaccine, effective distribution and wide acceptance. There are a lot of variables here, aren't there?
A lot of variables indeed, Jeremy, and so far we got on to a bad start, but nonetheless we started as far as the procurement is concerned, which means we have to actually see a critical mass vaccination sometime in the second half of next year. That's an assumption that we make if we look at the progress that has been made in other countries. But it will also depend on wide acceptance, as you highlighted. So far, the last survey from Ipsos only showed 53% of the surveyed population that would accept the vaccine if it is available, which is not enough to actually reach herd immunity. So as far as the economy is concerned, we expect herd immunity to be reached sometime in 2023 and beyond. And that will mean we are likely to get into a third wave of COVID infections come winter, or even a fourth wave of infections come the summer of this year towards the festive season, which will necessitate some level of lockdown that will negatively impact the economy.
You also make the point that economically, or the economic costs of the lockdown restrictions will continue to weigh on businesses and individuals. That makes perfect sense. What is of most concern, though, in terms of those economic costs?
Look, as we know, over the last 5 weeks or so, with the level 3 that was imposed again by government, tourism sector suffered hugely. Hospitality sector, the entertainment sector also suffered quite significantly, shut down completely, which also include the alcohol sector and related services, which means we should expect similar going forward. If we just look in 2020, we had liquidity problems, which by and large were solved by the Reserve Bank and commercial banks with the capital reduction that was given to commercial banks, but also with the credit guarantee scheme, though it was not taken up to a large extent, they solved liquidity problems. Where we are going to be dealing with credit risk, which means the fundamentals of businesses. And I heard you mentioning earlier on, Greyhound closing is one of those, which means the credit risk of companies is going to increase, and we expect liquidations and insolvencies or company bankruptcies to continue to increase, particularly for small, medium enterprises that have small balance sheet. They will not be able to actually deal with the changing business requirements, and they will close shop. Once that happens, people are going to lose jobs, which means, given that it is government's policies that have resulted in the loss of jobs, yes, it's necessary to save livelihoods, but economically, it's quite damaging. It becomes government's responsibility to actually cushion those that lose jobs from an income support, which is where we would expect the finance minister to extend the temporary employee-employer support relief scheme beyond where it was, which was the end of January. We think it must continue as long as we are in a state of disaster, as long as government can implement some sort of restriction in the economy.
And I am going to leave it there. Isam Mhlanga from Alexander Forbes, thank you very much for joining me.